It was a beautiful, breezy day by the water. Back in her homeland, she felt sun-kissed, just like how she used to growing up. And there, she saw him, her first love. As if no time had passed, the two ex-lovers quickly rekindled their love, hopelessly drawn to each other, a whirlwind all over again. Giddy with the rush of emotions, she inked her skin as a tribute to their love affair without even a moment's hesitation. Only a few years later, though, her skeletal remains would be found scattered with cow bones in a farmer's field, all the way in America.
That's odd.
Report suspicious activities.
It's raining today.
Born on September 23, 1989 in Port Antonio, Jamaica, Andreen Nicole McDonald was the second of three daughters to Maureen and Paul Anderson. Growing up in Jamaica, it was stated by her friend, Mandy Hall, that while they didn't have a lot growing up, they always figured that if they wanted to get somewhere in life, it would be America. That's where the dream was, and the dream came true. At 19, Andreen met Andre McDonald. 10 years older than her, Andre, also a native of Jamaica, was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. He had returned home to Port Antonio in May of 2009 to attend a funeral where he crossed paths with the beautiful Andreen. It was a whirlwind romance as they fell head over heels quickly, so much so that by that July they tied the knot, and off Andreen was whisked away by Andre to the land of her dreams, America. There they welcomed a baby girl, Elena, who became the center of Andreen's world. Together, the McDonalds lived happily, for a while anyway, while Andre served as a cyber warfare analyst at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio. Andreen, with the help of Andre, founded an assisted living business, Starlight Homes. You see, Andreen was not satisfied with simply coming to America. She desired to be one of those entrepreneurial success stories that she had heard of when she was just a girl in Jamaica. And it was not just desire she had, but an incredible work ethic and discipline. Every day by 5:30 a.m., she would be at the gym working out, and by 8 a.m., she would be in the office ready to work. By the time she was 29 years old, only 10 years after moving to America, through sheer determination and hard work, she grew Starlight Homes into multiple assisted living facilities worth millions. Not only had she become the successful businesswoman she had envisioned, but Andreen also became a highly generous member of her San Antonio community. She was known for her philanthropic efforts and active community involvement. For all intents and purposes, the McDonalds were the picture of the American dream, and Andreen and Andre, a power couple. However, beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. March 1st, 2019. Andreen was late to work. Her employees found it odd, but didn't think too much of it. Maybe something had come up, they thought. But as more time passed and Andreen didn't call to give any update, they started to get antsy and called her gym. But alas, they were notified that she had never even showed up to the gym that morning. Eventually, Andreen's mother, Maureen, was notified of her disappearance. After calling her daughter repeatedly with no answer but just the voicemail, by that very afternoon, Maureen reported her daughter missing. A welfare check at the McDonald residence in an upscale gated community revealed some disturbing finds. Andreen's purse and keys on the counter, but her phone nowhere to be found. Her vehicle still in her garage, cleaning supplies, blood stains, and a random seemingly fresh burn pile in the backyard containing a zipper from her blouse. Something had happened there. Based on their findings during the welfare check, the police became concerned about a potential abduction. Immediately, they tracked down Andre and notified him of his wife's disappearance. When questioned on his timeline of events leading up to his wife's disappearance, Andre told the detectives that when he woke up, he got their daughter Elena to school before reporting to Lackland Air Force Base. He stated that once he was notified that Andreen was missing, he rushed back home to confirm that she was indeed missing. But quickly after finding his home empty, he headed out the door again to a nearby hospital, on a hunch that Andreen, who suffered from migraines, might have gone there for treatment. His arrival at the hospital was captured by surveillance cameras. As seen in the footage, Andre walks in and goes up to the reception. You can see him talking to the receptionist. It was reported that he had asked about a patient with the last name McDonald, to which the receptionist answered that yes, indeed, there was a patient in room 3 with the last name McDonald. According to the hospital receptionist,
just so happened they were both African American as well. So McDonald's is not a very common name. So that's why I proceeded to open the door.
Yet, very, very oddly, instead of going to room number 3 like one would expect, he turned around and left to go back to his house. And once he arrived at his home, he told everyone that Andrain was at the hospital. However, when a deputy officer called the hospital to confirm Andre's lead, it was discovered that the McDonald who had checked into room number 3 was, in fact, not Andrain McDonald. Questioned why he returned without seeing her at the hospital, Andre told deputies that he had rushed back home before seeing his wife because he had left his cell phone at home and wanted to let Andrein's mother, Maureen, know he had found her beloved daughter. To him, telling his mother-in-law that he had found his wife was more important than actually confirming with his very eyes that she was indeed there first. That very evening, a forensic crime unit examined the possible bloodstains found in the McDonald's bathroom. It was confirmed that it was indeed blood. How it got there was the next question that needed answering. Investigators were hoping Andre had some answers, but he stated that the last time he had seen his wife was the night before, which only raised more questions than answers. Moreover, cuts observed on his hands didn't assuage their suspicions either. According to Andre, both he and Andrine had come home from the tax preparer's office on the evening of February 28th, and that they had argued over the business. To cool off, he had gone up the road to get some gas. What happened thereafter was more nebulous. When questioned what happened when he returned back home, Andre stated that he and Andrine retired into separate bedrooms. But upon further investigation, the police discovered that Andre had conveniently failed to mention the text message exchange that had happened at the gas station. In their chat history, what was revealed was a marriage in turmoil and on the brink of collapse. It included allegations of betrayal, accusations of unfaithfulness, and threats. One text from Andre read, "All you do is scheme, but I'm no fool." Another text by Andrine read, "If you bring up Aubin again, I will divorce you myself." And in response to Andrine's threat of divorce, Andre texted back, "I don't care if you get a divorce. You brought Aubin into our life." Who is Aubin, you might be wondering? Aubin Hall was a businessman living in Port Antonio, Jamaica. His relationship to the McDonalds? Well, according to investigators and her friends, Aubin was Andrine's ex-boyfriend and allegedly her lover, and they apparently went way back. It was reported that Andrine and Aubin dated when she was a teenager, before Andre came into the picture. Aubin was Andrine's first love. During one of her philanthropic trips to the island in 2017, the two rekindled their romance and started a secret affair. Well, the secret part of the affair is debatable, as Andrine got 2 tattoos in the summer of 2018 to celebrate her love for Aubin. One was the letter A, stylized on her hand, and the other a sequence of numbers on her wrist. Naturally, upon seeing these 2 new tattoos on his wife's skin, Andre became suspicious, and so he went and did some digging. It was on social media where he discovered a curious photograph of one individual named Aubin. There, this stranger was with the same exact stylized A tattoo in the middle of his chest. It wasn't long before he discovered that the numbers 14-3-76 tattooed on his wife's wrist was this man's birthday as well, day, month, and year. Enraged, Andre confronted Andrine with his discovery. He allegedly threatened divorce unless she covered up the tattoos immediately, cut off all contact with Aubin, and promised to never travel to Jamaica without him thereafter. Andrine complied. The McDonalds were going to put a smile on their face and move on, and they did. They played the happy, successful power couple well. At Andre's 40th birthday party, they were all smiles and joyous, ever the happy, loving couple. But just 13 days later, on March 1st, 2019, Andrine would vanish. Within hours of his wife's disappearance, Andre became a person of interest. At 2 p.m. the very next day, An undercover officer assigned to watch the McDonald's residence noticed that the garage looked damaged as Andre was backing out of the driveway. The officer followed him. As he did, he followed Andre all the way to a nearby gun shop. As Andre purchased a 9mm handgun and ammunition, additional officers were called to the scene for backup. Strangely, however, after paying for his purchase, he abruptly turned around to exit the shop without the selected gun, ammunition, and his ID. As Andre headed out the store to his car, officers confronted him and quickly detained him, after which he was turned over to military authorities for a mental evaluation. It is reported that investigators on the case were under the assumption that he purchased the gun to most likely harm himself. Following his detainment by military authorities, the officers returned to the McDonald's house with a search warrant, with the belief that it was the crime scene. There, when they finally checked Endrine's car, some objects caught their eye: a shovel, an axe, trash bags, gloves, and gas cans. And in a nondescript trash can inside the house, they found a curious torn-up Lowe's receipt. The date on the receipt? The day after Endrine went missing, March 2nd. The police moved quickly to acquire surveillance footage from the hardware store from that day. In the footage, you can see Andre entering the store quite nonchalantly, as if it were any other normal day, and not, only a day after his wife had been reported missing. In the store, he walks around with a cart as he picks up a shovel, hatchet, heavy-duty trash bags, gloves, 2 5-gallon gas cans, and an axe. And then, just as nonchalantly as he walked into the store, he calmly, without a care in the world, heads to the cashier to check out. Perhaps, even more unsettlingly, investigation discovered a handwritten list with all the items that Andre purchased, indicating that he had indeed meticulously planned his actions. Meanwhile, back at the house, officers discovered more damning evidence. In the corner of the garage, there stood a garbage can with articles of clothing and a hammer. On the hammer and a pair of jeans, they found traces of blood which forensics quickly determined belonged to Endrine. In all likelihood, they had just discovered the murder weapon, the hammer. But there was a problem. You see, all of the evidence was circumstantial at best. None of it could definitively prove that a murder had actually taken place, let alone that Andre was responsible for said murder. Without a body, it is extremely difficult to turn a missing persons case into a homicide case. Logically, it just doesn't make sense. March 3rd, 2019. The Air Force concluded its evaluation of Andre and released him. However, civil authorities quickly moved in and placed him under arrest, not for murder, but for tampering with evidence based upon the torn receipt found in his house. It wasn't long before he stopped cooperating with detectives and lawyered up.
They hadn't found the body, but if they find the body, she's not going to be alive.
For better or worse, this missing persons case was gaining notoriety. Thankfully, though, the San Antonio community rallied together to form a volunteer search party. But alas, Endrine would still not be found. In the midst of all this, on April 2nd, 2019, Andre was released from jail on a $300,000 bond that had been reduced from $2 million, according to court records. Oddly enough, he walked out with a book conspicuously open as if he were just reading it, or about to once he got away from the pesky press hounding him during his reading time. Just very odd stuff. And so it was. Andre was seemingly free while his wife remained missing, and she would continue to remain missing as days would eventually turn into months of dead ends. During this time, detectives naturally dug further into the couple's relationship to gain more insight and hopefully a lead. It was then that they discovered the mess beneath the surface. The McDonald's were not the American dream. Hiding behind that facade was a couple going through not only romantic problems, but business ones as well. In WhatsApp messages shared with friends, there were arguments over who really was the brains behind their successful business. In one, Endrine wrote to Andre, "Starlight Homes is my idea, my dream, and would not have happened without my drive." And in another text to a family friend, Andrew Russell, she texted, "Someone is going to snap." According to the family friend Andrew, the couple's war of words had even once turned physical. During the night before a Christmas party at their home in 2018, allegedly, when Andrew entered the kitchen, he found the couple grappling on the floor, but the very next day he found them laughing about it like it was no big deal. Something had to give, and it did. Just over 2 months later, Endrine's blood would be spilled in her home, and she would go missing. July 11, 2019, 133 days after Endrine was reported missing, there was a break in the case.
About 7:30 this evening, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office patrol deputies were dispatched to this location to a report of some human remains that were found.
This is actually quite literally ground zero for the search for Andrine McDonald. Our mounted patrol was up and down this road searching. These remains that were found this time, of course, it's too early to tell whether they're those of a male or a female.
In a farmer's field just 6 miles from the McDonald residence, human skeletal remains were discovered among cow bones. This is Clifton Klabunda. He was on a mission to retrieve cow heads for a friend that day. With permission from the landowners, Clifton was driving his tractor out into the dense wheat fields when he stumbled upon the bones.
My name's Clifton Labundi, but before I found the cows, that's why I saw the remains there.
When you saw the remains, what was the thing that you saw that
Well, the first thing I saw was a skull.
The skull belonged to Endrine. A wig and cross was also found among the remains. An autopsy revealed fractures to her jaw, neck, and ribs, consistent with blunt force trauma inflicted by a multi-faced tool, such as a hammer. Less than 48 hours later, after this tragic and horrific discovery,
the search for Andrine McDonald is officially over. We found her. We took Andre McDonald into custody for the offense of murder. He's been placed under arrest.
Andre was arrested and charged for his wife's murder. However, on November 12, 2021, after being held in the Bexar County Jail for more than 2 years, he would be released after posting a $200,000 bond, which had been lowered from $2 million. He remained under partial house arrest and GPS monitoring, and was even allowed to continue to work as a cyber warfare operations officer at Lackland Air Force Base. Yep, all while awaiting a trial for his wife's murder where he's the defendant. January 17th, 2023. It would be nearly 4 years after Endrine's death that her husband, Andre, would finally be put on trial for her murder. However, only 3 days before the trial was set to begin, Andre dropped a bombshell on Endrine's family. He called her sister Cindy Johnson and admitted to killing her. But it was not a murder confession per se. Instead, Andre told his sister-in-law that it was actually an act of self-defense, gone awry. This would be a claim he would repeat and stand by at trial. While seemingly audacious at face value, this defense did have some leg to stand on. For the prosecution, they were tasked with the challenge of making sense of the evidence found at the McDonald residence. You see, despite all the evidence, from the blood on the hammer to the forensics report on her bones, they could not definitively state for sure how Endrine actually died. Because her corpse had been exposed to the elements in the wheat fields for all those months, the medical examiner's office was never able to specify what exactly caused her death. Knowing this, and being represented by some of the top defense lawyers in San Antonio, Andre pleaded not guilty. While the prosecution believed Andre's motive in killing Endrine was largely because he felt emasculated and even jealous that she was a rising star who had control of Starlight Homes, the defense retorted that there was no evidence for such a claim, given that Andre was a major in the Air Force, incredibly successful in his own right. Furthermore, according to family friend Andrew Russell, it was Andre who was the principal investor of Starlight Homes. He stated that Andre liquidated his 401k and even sold his BMW in order to fund the assisted living business. This was corroborated by the prosecution as well, who stated that the couple had launched their company, and I quote, in large part with a loan Andre had secured. As an employee of the U.S. Air Force at the Lackland Air Force Base with 10-year seniority on his wife, Andre not only had the funds, but the credit necessary to help their dream come to fruition. Once they had the seed money and launched the business, though, Endrine handled most of the business's day-to-day operations, which transformed it into a multi-million-dollar enterprise in just 7 years. It is alleged that they split the profits 50-50. All these details about the business are important because as much as the turmoil between Endrine and Andre was personal, it was also a business disagreement. Who's to say where one ended and the other began? In all likelihood, it was hopelessly intertwined, tangled, and messy. For the defense, the intricacies of the couple's drama mattered less than proving that Endrine's death was reckless and not intentional, which was the prosecution's claim. The latter, intentional murder, would mean a life sentence, while the former, reckless death, just up to 20 years sentence.
Andre McDonald has already started the process of closure and healing. He talked to his mother, whom he calls Bob, and he told her what happened. He talked to his sister-in-law and told her what happened. It's about responsibility. He has taken responsibility, but it's simply not. This is not a murder case. It is a case about the degree and level of responsibility with evidence of accident, mutual violence, all of which happens in the blink of an eye.
Even the forensic pathologist, Dr. James Fig, who was called upon to take the stand by the prosecution, indirectly weakened the prosecution's case by virtue of not being able to support it via incontrovertible proof of cause of death.
So, the way that I have phrased her cause of death is homicidal violence, including blunt force trauma.
How did Andre McDonald pass away?
In order to answer that, I would have to tell the jury that there is uncertainty related to this case because of the fact that we are only looking at bones.
While Dr. Fig testified that Endrine's skeletal remains indicated severe injuries consistent with being struck by a blunt object, and that she had a fractured spinal cord, a broken rib, and a split jaw, he could not determine the exact cause of her death. As such, the prosecution could never fully prove that her murder was in fact intentional. For all intents and purposes, the prosecution was at an impasse, but not before pulling up Andre's search history.
I'm an investigator, Tony Coburn. It's Kobryn.
Note, very importantly, all of these searches took place in May, as the search for his missing wife was in full stride by the police and community. Yep.
21 says, importance of autopsy and criminal investigation. Determining cause of death from skeletal remains. Proving murder beyond reasonable doubt. FBI investigation. Cases without eyewitnesses. Forensics only cases conviction rate. Murder without weapon. Bloodstains and the environment. Bloodstained sunlight.
The next set of searches were from the exact day bones were discovered in the fields. I couldn't find if these searches were done before or after the discovery, but either way, very unsettling and damning.
How long does it take for a body to decompose outside? How long does it take for an unburied body to decompose? Skeleton decomposition. How long do bones take to become dry and brittle? Is Austin humid? Is Texas humid? DNA decay in humid weather. How long do bones take to become dry and brittle? DNA profiling after 6 months. Collecting DNA for testing after 6 months. Effects of outdoor weather on DNA testing.
Regardless, after 6 days of testimony and 33 witnesses, the prosecution rested. Finally, it was the defense's turn. They had only one witness, Andre McDonald. Andre described the evening of February 28, 2019, the day she was murdered. The couple had visited the tax preparer's office, where Andre discovered that not only had Andreen omitted his name in some crucial paperwork for their Starlight business, she had also started a new business a year earlier without his knowledge.
I remember when I did the edits for the business plan and submitted them to Andreen to give them to the bank, they were under Starlight Homes. But here on this form, it says there's a business plan going forward under Elena Property Management, which I knew nothing about, and immediately I just knew she was stealing from me.
What did that signify to you?
Basically, that meant to me pretty much that she was robbing me.
He then stated that after a heated argument about the business, he left the house to cool off at a nearby gas station, where he stated they continued their argument over text, and that when he returned home, he raised the possibility of divorce and splitting their business in half.
She became extremely irate at the thought of splitting the business. She charges into the room to confront me. So when she comes into the room, I turn around and she comes like right up in my face. So at that moment, she spits in my face. So at that point, grabbed her, so she's like right in front of me, so I grabbed her head. I think we had like a clash of heads, and I think it opened up like a cut somewhere on her face.
It was at this moment, Andre said, that Andreen ran into the bathroom and turned on the lights, and that when she saw her bloody face in the mirror, she started to attack him.
When she comes, she's like throwing like some punches, so I'm trying to like duck down and like keep my face from getting hit with the blows. But I remember like grabbing her and like tripping her, and then she like falls, and that's when I kick her like twice. The second kick, I think I heard like some type of wheezing, and then also, like in the background, I could hear like some footsteps.
The footsteps of their young daughter, Elena. Hearing her footsteps, Andre stated that he left the fight to put her back to bed. But when he returned about 30 minutes later, he found his wife still on the ground, where he had left her.
So after Elena falls back to sleep, that's when I, go back downstairs. I'm heading back to my room. And then when I, get inside the room, I notice Andreen is still lying in the floor right next to the door. So at that point, I sort of like, go over her and she's not moving. And then I bend over to like check, see.
Check.
Yes.
Sorry now.
So I bent over and then I like grabbed her face and then like feel like if I could feel like a pulse or something, and then I put my ear next to like her nose to see if she was breathing, and she was not.
What kind of reaction did that make?
So at that point, honestly, man, I became like pretty frantic at that point because of fucking shit. She's dead on the floor. We just had a fight. Obviously, I'm gonna get blamed for this.
When pressed further on his statement that he knew he would be blamed for her death, the defense asked if he felt guilty.
You said that you're going to get blamed for this. You think you were guilty of it?
No, I didn't think I was guilty, but knowing like the circumstance, there's obviously a dead person in your house, and you're the only adult there, and I know she's like, like issues before with the marriage where she's having an affair and stuff like that. So it just seemed like any run-of-the-mill police that, would be familiar with this situation. It just seemed like obvious, like, obviously we know why you do it kind of deal. So I was just trying to escape the whole situation.
When questioned what he did after he confirmed that Andreen had passed, Andre answered,
So at that point, I'm feeling like the house is like hot. So I went outside just to like get some fresh air and just to like, gather my thoughts and like think about like, what the hell is this going on? So I go outside and I'm, outside there like pacing around, and then I came back in to the house.
What did you do?
So when I got back in the house, I'm thinking, God damn it, I think I need to get her out of the house before, Elena wakes up and sees her in the house. And then, I don't know, man, at that point, I got this idea to just like get her out of the house. I'm just at that point moving like, basically like on instincts or something. But I go inside the garage and I grab like a couple of trash bags, and then I I put one over the top of her and then the other one under for the lower leg or something.
In cross-examination, when asked by the prosecution if he thought about calling 911, Andre answered,
I never thought about calling anybody to revive a dead person. My purpose at that point was simply to get her out of the house so that my 7-year-old daughter wouldn't see her mother laying on the floor dead.
And so after putting Elena back to bed, according to Andre, he dumped Endrine's body in a field after stripping her naked and returned home where he burned her clothing in the backyard. Okay, so let's quickly recap. The defense's case was that it was self-defense resulting in accidental death and a frantic cover-up. But what about Endrine's blood on the yellow hammer? If anything, this key piece of evidence didn't square up with the testimony of an accidental death Andre had given thus far. How did blood get on the hammer? At what point in the timeline was it used? Well, he had an explanation, a gruesome one. He testified that when investigators finished searching his home the day after her death, he went back to the field before dawn, angry and armed with the yellow hammer, a can of gasoline, and a plan.
My plan was to hit the person that caused this whole circumstance.
You felt it was her fault, right?
It's absolutely her fault.
What did you do with the gasoline?
I poured it on her and then I used the lighter and set it on fire.
Okay, but again, what about the hammer? Well, when the flame eventually subsided, Andre stated that that's when he attacked his wife's corpse with the yellow hammer.
I hit her in the face, the neck, and I just hit her again as I was walking away.
Why that last blow?
As I was walking away?
Yes.
I guess I was still angry when I was walking away.
After that gruesome testimony, the defense shifted gears to pad their self-defense argument. You see, the defense had rightfully gathered that it would be near impossible to convince a jury that a man had to go to such lengths to defend himself from his wife.
Andrine did defeat me, and she is so excited.
To that end, the defense played videos showing Endrine giving her husband a piggyback ride and working out. Yes, they really did that.
Would you describe Andrine as a very strong, powerful woman?
Yes, I would.
Were you in fear?
Yes, I was in fear of, being harmed during that whole situation.
Have you always believed you acted in self-defense?
Yes, I've always believed that from the very beginning.
Then came closing arguments.
Defense counsel said that this is self-defense. Folks, this is not self-defense. It's time to hold this man responsible for what he did. And it's time to find him guilty of murder.
Andre McDonald did not intentionally or knowingly murder Andrine McDonald. He acted in self-defense, and your duty and your obligation is to say, not guilty.
Approximately 11 hours into their deliberation, the jury sent a note to the judge that stated, "We're hopelessly deadlocked." According to them, they were unable to decide if Andre was guilty of murder, manslaughter, or not guilty by self-defense. The jury of 6 men and 6 women had a problem. It seems that at no point did any juror actually find Andre innocent, or even believe that it was self-defense. Their problem was semantics. They were grappling with the definitions of murder and recklessness. They were picking it apart. They spent hours discussing whether Andre had intentionally murdered Endrine, or if he had recklessly killed her. The former meant a life sentence for murder, while the latter would be a sentence of up to 20 years for manslaughter. Most of the jurors agreed that whatever had happened that night, it was reckless of Andre to leave her on the ground and not render any aid. However, it was harder to take the leap and get everyone on the same page that that action amounted to murder. According to the jury, the biggest factor for their deadlock was the lack of evidence to prove intentional murder. And in the face of this lack, it seems Andre's testimony played a huge role in their decision. For them, apart from the little evidence of intent, all they had to go off of was what Andre had said in court. And so, still deadlocked, the judge then invoked what's called an Allen charge, which is basically a supplemental jury instruction to facilitate a unanimous verdict. It's somewhat controversial, but the charge ultimately aims to prevent a mistrial by urging jurors to reconsider their positions and consider the views of others, or more specifically, the majority. And it worked. Finally, a verdict. After nearly 13 hours of deliberation,
and Mr. McDonald, please stand with your counsel. Charged in the indictment, the jury finds the defendant not guilty of the offense of murder, as charged in the indictment, and guilty of the offense of manslaughter.
Yep, not guilty of murder, but guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. While they rejected his argument of self-defense, they ultimately could not charge him with murder. So, despite his confession, the court sentenced him to only 20 years in prison, along with an additional 5 years for tampering with evidence, which he unsuccessfully appealed just 4 months later. Lest we forget, the ultimate victim in this story is Elena, Endrine's daughter then, only 7 years old. In the days following Endrine's disappearance, Elena, who had been diagnosed with autism, allegedly began to exhibit concerning and unusual behavior that suggested she may have directly or indirectly witnessed aspects of the crime. Despite her limited verbal communication, she reportedly used dolls or toys to simulate violent actions, including hitting motions, which raised concerns among caregivers and therapists. Hauntingly, she also mimicked scenes of someone being placed into a bag or container. Moreover, she reportedly said things like, "Daddy hurt Mommy," and "Mommy's in the fire," or "Mommy is broken." While fragmented and ambiguous, these statements were ultimately considered consistent with the forensic evidence. According to affidavits, Elena even made references to a place with cows, or where the cows are, which eerily matched the location where Endrine's body was eventually found. How she was privy to this information is still unclear till this day, however, especially if we go by Andre's testimony that he had disposed of Endrine's body after putting Elena to sleep. Regardless, psychologists and child welfare experts involved in the case emphasized they believed that her actions and behavior were not merely coincidental, but rather responses to witnessing something traumatic. Though she never took the witness stand, Elena was, in many ways, the unspoken witness to the horrific crime. However, silent, she was not. For the day of sentencing, she wrote a letter to the murderer of her beloved mother, which a victim's advocate read. In it, she declared emphatically,
"To Andre McDonald, you killed my mother. You took away my life. And you broke my heart. And you hurt my feelings. And you will pay for what you did. And you will be punished forever."
Can Mommy get a kiss? Love you.
"Rest in peace, Endrine."